There we go. Gotten into Canvas. Let me double check one last time online before I get started. I don't think I missed anybody. Sarah and Taylor. I don't think I'm missing anyone. No, seriously, I don't want to go 100% remote. It's horrible. As I already know full well, there are students that just turn on their Google Meets and go back to bed. I'm not stupid. I know, I'm not saying you, okay, but I know that happens with some. Alrighty, pull up the right slide. Okay, so for the opener, we talked about index fossils specifically yesterday. And if I would have really thought about this, I would have pushed yesterday's to today and today's to yesterday, but it didn't happen. So we're going to do all the types of fossils today, not in depth, do types, not each individual fossil, just the generic types. And I should have let you all see the trilobites. I put all my fossils back up. I'm hoping I can get a decent set of index fossils for next year. But there are different types of index fossils besides marine life. Okay, we use the marine life as your primary basis because most of our planet was aquatic at one point in time before you had your magma trying to push up that eventually made islands and then made continents. We were primarily water at one point in time. So besides your trilobites and your clams and your coral and your starfish and your sea scorpions and all the other types of index fossils that were marine, there were other types of index fossils. What would they have been? Yes. Actually, those are preserved remains. That's one of the last ones that we're going to talk about. In fact, we just came across a woolly mammoth calf within the last 20 years, and it was less than that. And it was so viable that they could take the DNA out of it, implant it into a elephant's egg, like strip the egg, bleach the egg of the DNA, and like there was enough DNA there that they could have created baby woolly mammoths. They didn't do it, but they could have. It's like Jurassic Park kind of stuff.
Those aren't fossils.
It is preserved remains. They are, but they actually have viable DNA. And it's very rare to actually have it as flesh. Normally it's within teeth. But in that case, do you know what I'm talking about when they found that calf? About the size of this desktop, if you will. Where they could have taken the DNA out, made sure it was viable DNA, and literally taken the egg from an elephant, from I think they're called cows, I think are female elephants. I'm not 100% sure. I know the males are bulls, but literally pull the DNA out of her egg and then take the DNA from that calf and inject it into it and implant it like IVF for people, and then hope it sticks. And the elephant would have a baby, a duplicate. They didn't do it. It's possible. It's possible, okay, but they didn't do it. So like I'm sure all of you have seen the movie Jurassic Park, okay, and like the guy's walking stick with the amber on the top with the mosquito inside it.
The mosquito
It not only has its DNA, but also has dinosaur DNA in the blood. So is it probable? No. Is it possible? Yes.
Is it possibly
you can have a pet triceratops. You could ride around and then just somebody you don't like and they just hit it. So no, to my knowledge, nobody's actually reverse engineered it to be able to do that, but it is possible. So there are all different kinds of organisms, not just what you think of as mega fauna, like critters, like us, okay, but also plants. So we are going to talk about the different types of fossils. Just some really, really basic stuff that y'all should know at this point. Yes, there are paper copies up here, but for a very long time, we didn't know any of this stuff. because we were considered uneducated, like, not cave people, but we didn't pay attention. And eventually we started digging up stuff and realizing that these things weren't normal, whether they be animal or plant for that matter. And we created essentially what's called paleontology, people that study fossils, whether they be animal or plant, the preserved remains, whether they be truly preserved, like what you said, ice or amber, or even the bog people, which are really weird, but we'll talk about them in a bit. Or they're just fossilized remains, and preserved and fossilized aren't exactly the same thing. Which you think of in those trilobites that I showed you, those little critters, those little like crab / silverfish critters that I showed you all yesterday. That was a cast mold. That wasn't the original one that was found. It was a copy of the original one that was found. But that critter still lived between 500 million and 570 million years ago. But people who study ancient life, they're fossils or paleontologists, whether they be actual bones, they be carbon films, they be, like you said, that when they find them in ice that are insanely preserved, or they're mummified, which is normally in the desert, or high up in the mountains where it's very, very, very dry. There were, I'm going to probably say the wrong culture. I'm not doing it on purpose. I want to say it was Aztec. There were young girls that were found essentially in the fetal position in what looked like a burlap sack, that were high in the mountains. And you could still, like, you could literally brush their hair. You could see their fingernails because it was so dry. It's the moisture that damages tissue. The absence of that actually mummifies them. I'm going to say it was Aztec.
Didn't they find cavemen on icebergs or something like
Yep, yep, that too. In fact, he still had tattoos on his skin. And I want to say it was his leg that was broken, and it was very obviously fixed by humans. So either splint, not modern day casts. But no, I know the one that you're talking about. We found them, and like ice is what's considered a preserved remain. It's technically a fossil, but not like what you think of as a fossil, because there's viable flesh that's left behind. Where in the case of this caveman or Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon or whatever his time frame was, because I can't remember, you could literally take his DNA and then take a woman's egg, strip the DNA, inject the caveman's DNA into it, and you have a clone. We have the ability to do that. We've done that with animals. To my knowledge, we've not done that with people. In fact, with technology, technically, women don't need men anymore, but we can only have girls and have boys. Technically, I can give birth to myself. Technically. It's not ethical, and it doesn't happen. No, I'm not trying to be all crazy about it, but technically, with technology, all you need is viable DNA. You take an egg, you literally strip its DNA out, so it's like an empty shell, if you will, and you take whatever DNA you want to go in there, and you inject it, put it into a viable female, so it can be incubated, if you will, for lack of a better phrase to put there. I could technically give birth to a clone. I would be my mom and my daughter and everything all at the same time. It's just, we don't do it because it's not ethical. At least not in this country, we don't do it. I don't know about other countries, but in this country, no. So the clones that I know of where they've done that, there was the cow. The original cow's name was Pete, and so the clone's name was Repeat. No pun intended. Okay, and then there was a cat And that was done with A&M. There was Dolly the sheep. Now, Dolly the sheep had problems with her telomeres, part of the DNA, very, very tips of the DNA. And her telomeres, they basically fell off too fast, and she aged prematurely and she died. But that was Dolly the sheep. There was Copycat the cat. There was Repeat the steer. There was a dog too, but I can't remember the name. But to my knowledge, we've not done it with people. To my knowledge, we've not done it with people. So we have different fossils that I put images on. This one, like I said, I just built this yesterday in third period, so I didn't put a lot of the pictures on there. This top left section, those of you that are online, so maybe what top left means. These are ammonites. These are trilobites, different types actually here. That was the type, then there's another one down here, and there's a bit of one down here. We've got obviously a fish, we got an ichthy down here, and then we have a dragonfly. And when you have very delicate tissue, like plants and insects, it's a different type of fossil here than it was with these. Because the other three all had bones, or they had hard shells, they had an exoskeleton, they had something hard to absorb and create a fossil. But this dragonfly did not. So this is a different type of fossil. And plants and insects did what's on the bottom right. So if something's fossilized, it has some way, somehow gone through a chemical process to leave an imprint. Okay, now it could be the actual bones that absorb materials. It could be the tree that absorbed stuff and then it was petrified. It could be very delicate tissue, like that dragonfly that just left its sort of like it's negative. It's carbon film, it's negative in the rock. But there's no bones in dragonflies. But most fossils obviously had to be alive. Okay? Tree, fern, insects, saber-toothed tiger, whatever. And then it died in whatever shape, matter, or form. And then some type of a chemical process occurred with its tissues, not necessarily the soft tissue, but the harder parts, and left an imprint behind. There are different types of fossils, which is what we're going to talk about today. We only talked about index fossils, the marine, and we don't have any fossils not behind, but older than those trilobites because of that hard exoskeleton. It had to have something that could be solidified. So even with the mollusks, the ammonites, essentially a giant snail, the snail part was gone. The shell part was left behind. And that's what left the fossil. On land, it's different. On land, we can get these carbon residues that leave an imprint behind. In the ocean, that didn't happen. So it depends on where the critter, for lack of a better phrase, where the critter existed as to what type of fossil could happen. So I should have put 2 giant charts, which I don't know if you can make them bigger or not in your canvas, but we have what's called the fossil record. And for a very long time, it was marine. That's where life began. About 500 million years ago, give or take, we started having plants, not animals, plants coming on land. Insects were first, as far as the critters, what you think of as a critter, because you don't think of bacteria as a critter. But insects were first for a very long time. It was dragonflies that were larger than me, like huge. But eventually we had what you think of as the dinosaurs, the theropods. And I cannot remember its name off the top of my head. I have to very much brush up on my dinosaurs, but the one with the big sail on its back, that was before the Triassic. That was, if I'm not mistaken, in the Permian. That was actually an aquatic critter. It helped buoy its body. That was the first transition, the big, like four-legged transition between the water and the land. I cannot remember its name off the top of my head. Not the Stegosaurus, that was the one with the plates on it. It had like a giant sail, like a fin down its back. I just can't remember its name off the top of my head. We're not going to do all the dinosaurs and stuff until next 6 weeks. So I have time to brush up. So we take a look at not just the animals, but also the plants. And that has given us essentially a window of time in the past to figure out the ecology of what life was like. I know a lot of you have seen the movie Jurassic Park. Now in the movie, they took, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I've seen it. They took the mosquito blood and then they reverse engineered it with frog DNA. And that's what actually allowed the females to switch from female to male because they didn't want it to repopulate, but it did anyways. And yes, there are certain animals that can switch sex. I actually had cichlids where I had a male that switched to female. And I seriously didn't think it was possible, but I watched it happen in my own fish tank. Fish and amphibians have the ability to switch sex. If there's not enough of the opposite sex, like they will do it. And I watched it happen with my cichlids. In fact, Coach O next door, he's got a couple of cichlids. They're some of the smartest fish on the planet, actually. Oh, there was one more. So there, like I said, there are windows into the past. I sure hope I'm not muted online. You double check real quick. Oh, good. I'm not. I don't see anybody else new. We don't have any other way to take a look at the past. It'd be awesome if we had a time machine, but even time machines can only go to the future. They can't go to the past. It's a paradox. It won't happen. We can see the past, we just can't go to the past. According to modern physics, we cannot go to the past. But we can witness it. We do it all the time. If you go outside and stare at the sun, that's 8.5 minutes ago. Technically, everything that we see is not now, it was then. Somebody got kicked out. What happened? Come on, work, function. Okay, so now we're gonna do all of these in a bit. Each one of these individually. And we have different types of fossils. Okay, we've got petrified wood. And we've got molds and casts. This is what you guys looked at yesterday with that trilobite. That wasn't the original sample. It was a cast of the original wood. Wherever it came from, because I don't know. You've got your delicate tissue, which are carbon films. You've got footprints, which are and burrows and runs that are going to be trace fossils. But then we did index specifically yesterday. Preserved remains is the one that you brought up, Cody. Amber, ice, and tar. Like the La Brea carpets, which if I'm not mistaken are in California, but I need to double check that too. So first, petrified wood specifically. In fact, there is. In those fossil boxes, all that stuff I was checking, there was a chunk of petrified wood in there. When I went to Yellowstone over a decade ago, I cannot wait to take my daughter there, but over a decade ago when I went to Yellowstone, there is a decent sized trunk of a tree, about yay high, and they actually had to like block it off, like not just with ropes, like cage it off because people were taking pieces of a petrified trunk. You've got different materials and minerals that get soaked into the soft tissue. In this case, it's wood, it's carbonized. And then, what's going on? Hold on, let me make sure we don't have a question. And then when the water evaporates, it's like going crazy online here. I don't know if it's email or if it's. Okay, I'm getting all different kinds of stuff being sent. I got to do that in my off period. But anyways, when the water evaporates out, your heavy minerals, your deposits, if you will, are, oh my goodness. It's just going nuts. Let me delete that.
Remember listening to?
Yes, we'll come. But your heavier minerals are left behind, which changes the composition of the soft tissue, the delicate tissue, and it petrifies it, and it turns it into stone. Like I said, the boxes that I had, the fossils, there was petrified wood in there. I need to go through my vendors, and I need to find decent index fossils that actually have a key, so I know which one is which, because there were a lot of fossils in those boxes where I think I know what they are, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a paleontologist. I can't tell by looking at a nautilus shell what era it came from. Was it the Silurian? Was it Devonian? Like I don't know where it came from. Molds and casts. This is a trilobite. If you guys looked at it, there was one that was in really good shape where you can actually see almost like a hammerhead looking battering ram, like a horseshoe crab coming off its face. I didn't pay attention to see if you could see where the eyes would have been. It has to be a really good sample to see that. But a mold and cast is the absolute most common type of fossil period in the story. You ever seen like Bigfoot hunters or any of those shows on TV? So when they find a footprint, they pour plaster of Paris in it and they let it solidify. Okay, and that is a mold of the footprint. So now you have this footprint. Well, they can come back and make a cast of the footprint, sort of like a cake pan versus a cake. And then they use that to make more molds, which is what those trilobites were. Now, technically, what you guys touched was not 500 million years old. The specimen it came from was at least 500 million years old, up to almost 600. So casts, which is what those were, are copies of the original organism. And I wish I had one that was complete. They were missing the tail end. There was only one that the front end actually was complete. And like I said, I've been to museums and I've seen trilobites literally that from the floor were this big. They're over 2 feet tall. Literally, they were the cockroaches of the sea. They were everywhere. But yes, absolutely, your most common fossil is a mold and cast. And I know the first school that I worked at in Belmont, I took the kids to the Houston Museum of Natural Science. Most of them had never been to a museum. And we came into the dinosaur exhibit, and they were like, well, these aren't real. And I said, well, okay, technically you're right. They are casts of original bones that were found. And really, all it takes is this bone right here in the dinosaur what we would consider a femur, to figure out the rest of the animal. In fact, I'm not sure with the museum that, I don't know about Fort Worth. I have not been to the Fort Worth Museum since I was a kid. How many of the actual dinosaur bones that are in the exhibits are real? There's a very slight chance that any of them are the original bones. Normally they're preserved. Basically, they're kept in the basement. It's copies of them that are being displayed for multiple reasons. They don't want them to be damaged. And the next type, carbonization or a carbon film. These are the delicate tissues. Your plants, ferns, trees, flowers. Your insects, their wings. Their wings are not normally going to fossilize. They don't have hard parts. They're way, way, way too delicate. Are you okay? Choking. Ew. Yes. Cough like that. You think you got the Rona.
I can tell when he's in home.
Yeah. No, it's all right. I do that from time to time where you literally choke on your own spit, which is gross, but it happens. So a carbon film, these are delicate tissues, like wings on insects, the petals on flowers. This is a fern. They don't have hard parts to turn into rock. So what happens is plant falls down or whatever happens, and you have other sediment that lands on top of it. And as the gases, there's quite a bit of carbon inside our bodies. You can actually turn people that have died into diamonds if you really have the money for it. But we have a certain amount of carbon that's present in anything that's alive. And once it dies, everything else essentially evaporates. The oxygen, the nitrogen, a lot of it sort of goes away and it leaves behind this carbon residue, which is actually an imprint. If any of you have a driveway that is made up of what we call caliche, which is crushed shale, not like concrete, okay, like crushed rock. Shale is a decently dark gray material. You can find this kind of stuff left and right, whether it be plant, it be animal, where it's not like bones that you see on it, but you see this imprint of a fossil, which is carbonization. It's just the leftovers, essentially. This is a flower. This is a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a monocot. Odds are monocots and evens are dicots. The last plants to have actually developed were your flowering plants. But way before we came around. But normally you wouldn't be able to see the petals of the flower. It's also the feathers that we've seen on dinosaurs. They're this type of fossil. Trace fossils. Next type. Trace fossils. Uh-oh. It's not. Trace fossils. Now I only put one picture up here because I only had so much room. Footprints are trace fossils. They're not bones. Trace fossils can show you how fast things move. You can see the distance between a footprint, depending on what animal it came from, critter it came from, the theropod specifically. How far apart each foot was how fast it would have ended up moving. There's a teeny tiny bit of physics in there. It's nothing crazy. It's the same thing that cops do when they analyze like a crash and whatnot, skid marks and everything. From what they see, they can figure out how fast the person was going. These are burrows. Okay, so they're not, they sort of look like worms, but they're not worms. They're the habitat that was left behind, but whatever critter, whatever it was that moved through the ground. So footprints, burrows, runs, the evidence of the actual life of the creature, not just its remains, but how it actually existed as a trace fossil. I've never come across dinosaur footprints in my life. I know that there's places that you can go to see them, but I've never personally been there. I mean, in this country, it's not like you have to go across the world or anything. And if I'm not mistaken, the tar pits, let me see the tar. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to trust the internet. It's not going to lie. I think the La Brea tar pits were in California. But I'm going to fact check myself. And trust that the internet does not lie. Tar pits. Los Angeles. Website. Oh, they're closed because of COVID. Go figure. The La Brea tar pits. It's in Los Angeles. LA, California. The one that we've pulled so many mammoth and saber-tooth complete skeletons, for that matter, out of. Index fossils is the one that we focused on yesterday. If I would have thought about it, I would have done these before yesterday, but I didn't build these notes until third period yesterday, so they're sort of out of place. But index fossils, more often than not, will be marine. And the trilobite is this guy over here on the left. This is the one that we were looking at yesterday. So you've got this sort of hammerhead face thing going on here, and then you've got this centipede segmented body. Most of them were cut off about here. They didn't have the back end. Ammonites, these were much later than trilobites. Trilobites are the oldest ones. They are your spiral snail shell design. This design has been around for a very long time, and it's been repeated over and over and over. And I am really hoping, whenever the heck I get the time to do it, to find a decent index fossil set. There are a couple of things that you guys have that are embedded in Canvas after this. Just because I wasn't going to have you write everything down with yours. It's stupid. But I'm sorry if you got a paper version and the one with the dinosaurs on it is difficult to see. But they are in Canvas. Got it?
Yeah.
So you guys have both of these. So going back in time, your oldest down here at the bottom are your trilobites. And yes, you have a brachiopod here. You have a different modified trilobite here. Your first nautilus shells, your spiraled snail shells, not circular, you're spiral to a point. And then we just sort of go towards modern time, and up at the very, very top, we have what we would consider a skeleton. Your dinosaurs. So once again, way back in time, are your trilobites. You got your nautilus shells, your sea scorpions. This is some type of a squid. Your brachiopods, your insects. This is that sail-backed dinosaur that it's just escaping me right now what it's called. Your very early dinosaurs in your Triassic. This is a Brontosaurus. This is in the Jurassic. Your Triceratops was in your Cretaceous. And then going newer, horses, saber-toothed tigers, so on and so forth in our tertiary. Jurassic Park made it seem like they were all alive at the same time. And granted, this was Hollywood. This wasn't real life. And they sort of were reverse engineering these guys. But these did not exist at the same time. They were in two totally different eras. All right, preserved remains. This is the one that you brought up, Kaden. Very little change. Viable DNA, actual tissue, and if it's not preserved properly, it will decay. This is a bog mummy. These are in Europe. If I'm not mistaken, it's in Great Britain proper, which includes Scotland. And they're all red haired. Every single one of them. In fact, most of their skin has been turned black because of the heat that these people were preserved in. Not that their skin was originally that color, it was dyed that color by what they were preserved in. But we've had all different kinds of mummies done. And it's not all the Egyptian way where they actually wrapped them up and used honey and took out the internal organs and blah, 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 blah. This was done by people who actually died within these peat bogs, bog mummies, peat bogs, and it preserved them. These are the people where if we really wanted to, we could bring them back to life. Of course, they wouldn't mentally be the same person, but physically they would. Tar. The La Brea tar pits, which I just double checked and looked up, they're in Los Angeles. Your woolly mammoths, obviously this is a fabrication. This is not this one's not real on the right. The one on the left is actually a saber-tooth, a complete fossil record of this individual critter that was preserved in the actual tar pits. They pulled countless full skeletons of saber-tooth tigers and these mammoths out of these pits. So basically what happened was the mammoth got stuck with this one, and then the tigers were like, oh, hey, free food, and they go to jump on it, but then they got stuck in it. So you've got countless of both the herbivore, this guy, and then the carnivore that was trying to eat on it that are in multiple layers of these tar pits. They couldn't get out. And then the last, let's see, I think there's two more. Amber, this is your infamous Jurassic Park thing. The guy that ran it, can't remember his name off the top of my head, he had a cane. On top of the cane, there was this polished amber globe. And inside that was a mosquito. And yeah, technically, you could pull dinosaur DNA out of said mosquito. Would it be complete enough to actually be able to do what they did in Jurassic Park? Probably not, but is it possible? Yes. Has anybody actually done that outside of the movies? No. They haven't. It may not be possible. There's been a few times I've actually come across samples like this, and I've almost bought them, but they're so expensive, like the really good samples, that I couldn't justify it. But they could be ants, they could be mosquitoes, they could be dragonflies, it could be any kind of little critter that went into tree sap, which is what amber is, tree sap. And then over time, it solidified and it hardened and it turned into what we call amber. Got one more. Ice. This is what you were talking about, Kaden, right here. This was recent. They found a baby mammoth calf. That was whatever the glacier was, the ice sheet, wherever it was, I can't remember. It melted down enough where they saw fur. And they went in and they dug it out. And this was a baby mammoth calf that was preserved enough where if you really wanted to create a replica of something that was extinct, this is what it would come from. But you have preserved remains.
Well, I feel about that.
Do what now?
I feel about that.
You did. This was not that long ago. Y'all were probably really little when this happened. But I remember them coming across this. And they like defrosted the ice, if you will, and then it started rotting. And so they had to put it back in a very, very dry environment, very dry, cold environment to prevent it from decaying even more. But this was up until I know it's about time for the bell to ring. In fact, I'm going to stop off the recording and I'm going to double check. Let's see, stop recording. Let me double check online. Let me look and see when this happened. Let's see. Ice mammoth calf. That should tell me. They named it La Yuba, Lyuba.
I remember, people were saying like, they can make it fun.
Yeah, no, seriously. And like I said, all you have to do is now, here's the problem. Mammoths are much larger than elephants. Okay, so if you did take its DNA, and I wanted to stop recording, stop recording. If you did take its